Hi, I'm Aditi Shaker, founder and CEO of Zeta, and today I'm looking forward to diving in with our expert, Adam Kol. Adam is a certified couples counselor, a conflict negotiator, and an awesome gentleman. And he's going to spend the day today telling us about the do's and don'ts about communicating our money in a relationship. Adam, can you introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Aditi. I love what you have created with Zeta. I'm all about couples getting on the same page about their finances. And that's the work that I do, not only in the content I create, but also personalized coaching with couples, which is about not just resolving your money fights, but learning how to have healthy talks, get on the same page, and cultivate and execute whatever is your individual vision or your couple's vision for financial security and financial prosperity. And just to give you a little bit of background, I have had a few different paths and things I've specialized in, but I used to be a tax attorney. And before that, I was a financial advisor. I worked for Northwestern Mutual. And it was through those fields where I just saw the importance of not only financial education, but also how much these issues can impact people and families and how much stress they can create. And then I have also a lot of experience more in the last 5 or 6 years as a community organizer, dealing with conflict resolution, and became a certified mediator. And with all of that, I really had the confidence then to start this business. And I saw financial stress is one of the biggest areas for fights for couples. It's a top cause of breakups and divorce. And for me, having that background, both on the finance side of things, as well as on the relationship and communication mediation side of things, I saw an opportunity to make a real contribution. And that's the business I built.
Preach. So let's start with the basics, Adam. When do you recommend couples to actually start discussing finances in a relationship? Date one?
I sound like a lawyer when I say this, but it depends. But in general, what I say is take note of the ways in which your decisions are impacting each other's finances. So when you're just going out on your first date, maybe not such a big deal. But by the time you're seeing each other regularly, going out together a lot. I mean, now we're in the age of COVID, maybe not going out so much, but in a time where that may not be the case.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, that's not usually too expensive. Or in a time where you're taking vacations together, those choices are now impacting each of your finances. Right. And I share on one of my YouTube videos a story of my ex-girlfriend when she wanted to go away for a long weekend because she works an office job. And I was a little nervous about money. I wanted to save it and put it all into my business. And she wanted to go away for 2 days and I wanted to just go away for one. And I was embarrassed to say, oh, it's because I want to save this money and not spend it, right? And I missed out on a chance there to be understood and to create intimacy. So what I recommend is as soon as you're at that phase where the decisions you're making together are having any sort of substantial effect on your financial situation, if not sooner, that's a really important time to start talking about money. And it doesn't have to be, showing each other your bank accounts or your net worth statements at that phase. It's just have a conversation that is contextually relevant, right? If we're going on vacations together, let's talk about our budgets for vacations, right? If we're going to move in together, let's talk now about our overall income and what we can do. If we're getting married, okay, now we definitely want to be talking about everything.
That makes a ton of sense. And often when couples are talking about money, it creates a lot of anxiety and stress. So sometimes they might avoid talking about money. What are the most common sort of mistakes that you tend to see in your counseling work when you're working with couples when it comes to talking about money?
Yeah, so avoiding it, like you said, that's definitely a mistake because it can lead to resentment or anxiety. You miss out on a chance to work as a team and to build that intimacy. So not talking about it is a mistake, right? If you're ready to talk about it, especially if it's an uncomfortable or tense topic, one of the biggest mistakes I see couples make is going straight to the numbers and to a particular decision and trying to decide without a broader context, like, should we stop going out to eat as much? Oftentimes that is a trap. It can get you into an argument because you don't have an understanding of your own values around money. Maybe you certainly don't understand your partner's. You two don't have that shared agreement. You don't have a sense of the bigger picture and what your goals are financially. And so if you just hone in on like one particular decision, right, without that broader view, it can really get you into trouble. So I always recommend that couples start by opening up the dialogue, talking about how they feel about money, what they saw growing up, talking about some of their hopes, dreams, fears, and worries, and their priorities and values. And from there, then you can zoom more into particular decisions.
Got it. And pulling on that thread a little bit, are there certain rituals or just like best practices that you've seen in terms of how couples talk about money or what makes them successful at managing money together?
Yeah, well, you know, as Zeta has the Money Date Mag, obviously
Yeah.
money dates are terrific. Having some sort of regular time where you know you're going to conference together, this is super helpful because as things crop up, you know, during the week, or let's say you're meeting every week or two, you don't have to like jump on your partner as soon as they get home from work, right? You know that you've got a standing time every Sunday morning at 11. You're going to talk about this. Okay, great. So I can bring this up then, right? And nothing's going to go more than a week and get too out of hand. So
Hmm.
having some sort of regular space for those talks is helpful. Other things are just try to create a space and time where you can be present with
Hmm.
as little distraction as possible. When you're first starting the conversation and or you're having a particularly tense or uncomfortable one, put the phones and the laptops away, right? Just
Hmm.
make sure your partner knows you're present with them and really listening to what they have to say. And just coming at it with the same care that you would any other part of your relationship, or that you'd want to come to any other part of your relationship with, you know, and whatever that takes. For some people, that means they go do yoga or meditate before a conversation. For some people, they like to cuddle first. You know, for
Hmm.
me, when I'm talking to a significant other and I feel myself kind of like getting upset or defensive and getting in my head, I will sometimes reach out and touch the other person, right? Just
Hmm.
put my hand on their shoulder or their arm or their leg. And that just, for me, that's very grounding, because you don't get bonus points for like having these conversations while you're both on your cell phones after your worst day of work ever, right? The whole
Right.
point is to have the best life you can, and being in a good frame of mind for these conversations, especially early on when you're cultivating trust and safety around it, is
Yeah.
key.
I like that. Use everything you've got, right?
Yeah.
And you know, given all the couples sort of counseling sessions that you've had and the couples that you've worked with, I imagine that there are common money issues that you see in every relationship. And I was wondering if you could walk us through what some of those are.
Yeah, and there's a fair number. Big one
Hmm.
is when there is some sort of difference in income that
Hmm.
each person is bringing in. Relatedly, if they have a different background with money, which could mean two things, right? Number one is like how much resources does my family have versus your family?
Hmm.
Imagine someone who comes from a wealthy family who owns their home. They can maybe, let's say, be more comfortable taking a certain risk, whereas if their partner doesn't have that option, they're a little more nervous to take a big risk like starting a business or something like
Hmm.
that. Other things come from the any debt that a couple might hold and how to figure that out. Should I be helping you out with your debt if we're together? Should I not? And the dynamics around that. I mentioned families before. If you come from different backgrounds regarding money, whether that's how you grew up. And I
Hmm.
don't just mean the amount of income or wealth, but also
Hmm.
just the way that you related to money, right? A lot of times, like with anything else, we inherit from our parents, our family, as well as our culture, our society. There are all kinds of messages we receive about money based on things like race, gender, sexual orientation, norms and stereotypes that we may consciously accept or reject. Either way, that influences us, and they may even affect us at a subconscious level, right? So
Hmm.
really looking into some of those things, because they can create tension. uh, Other issues are just sometimes couples don't know a lot about money, or
Hmm.
they are intimidated by numbers, and so that can lead to avoiding the conversation or getting upset or defensive when it does come up. Another thing is one partner is more comfortable spending, including on themselves, but the other one, especially if they're in debt, it feels
Hmm.
guilty spending, right? And then that they kind of martyr themselves, and then you have this resentment. And then the partner who doesn't spend, they get to feel self-righteous, but they actually, not only do they not get the things they want, but the other partner loses out on the opportunity to really be there for their significant other, right? Like if I don't know what my wife desires, how can I be her partner in having her get those things, whether I help her get them or she does it on her own, whatever. But if I don't know, how can I support her, right? So there are so many different obstacles. You know, we talked about debt, credit card debt, student loan debt, decisions around family, like for example, if you want to support a family member or have family members move in with you for temporarily or permanently, of course, around having kids, which is issues like fertility, which if you're having trouble conceiving on your own, it can be very expensive, or the adoption process. I've had a great episode on my podcast talking about fertility and adoption. And then even when you have kids, what kind of decisions are we making? You know, what kind of schools are they going to? What kind of activities? How much money do we want to put towards the kids versus our debt versus retirement, right? Standard of living. I mean, there's so many different challenges. And yet, and I think we'll speak to this, but the core of how to resolve them is very similar, which is the good news.
That's great. I was just going to say, it sounds like a minefield. So I want to get our hands dirty and actually start solving some of these problems, because our viewers are certainly, you know, struggling with some of these dynamics in their own relationships and their own lives. So why don't we start with a common one that we hear about, which is, you know, one partner is potentially not as interested in the money conversations or even attending the money date as the other partner. Any suggestions or best practices on how to get that second partner involved, or the uninterested party involved?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it. It's actually probably the number one thing that I see is that one person maybe wants to work on this and the other one is more hesitant. Well, the first thing I would say is, how are you framing and coming to them when you ask them to have these conversations? So a lot of people are like, we need to talk about money. Could be a little bit, could create some defensiveness versus like, hey, you know what, spouse, I love you. I am so excited for our life together. I want to have the best life ever for us and our family. And I'm realizing I think we could really kick even more butt if we were really on the same page with our finances. Like, what do you think? When's a good time to talk about that and like kick that into high gear? Right. Well, it's such a different conversation when it's framed in terms of what you want for yourself, what you want for them, what you want for your relationship and your family. Right. And I always say, if you've asked in the past and it hasn't worked, or you haven't asked, but you've just been like sitting there kind of maybe stewing in your resentment or anxiety that you haven't been able to talk about money, along with that vision for the future, you can also take responsibility for your role and things getting to the place they are, which is like, you know what, it's been X years and I've been sitting over here feeling anxious and letting resentment build, and that's super unfair to you. That's not the kind of partner I want to be, right? So let me apologize. I want to take responsibility for that and hear anything you have to say about it, because I want us to have the best life ever, and I think talking about money will help us get there.
I love that. And one sort of issue or cause of disinterest can sometimes be that you have very different money personalities. And so as a result of that, you know, each of you maybe has different goals that you're optimizing for. So in my life, I am an amasser. I like to save money, but I'm happy to spend it if I think it's going to make me money. Whereas my partner is much more of a spender. He loves this, like he likes those, you know, buying a fancy sweater or 18 pairs of these specific shoes that he's currently obsessed with. Whatever it may be. And how do you navigate those personalities? How do you get on the same page if you really do have very competing or different personalities?
Great question. Thanks for sharing about you and your husband. You know, I'm not a shoe person, but I certainly know some shoe people. I think I'm a little closer to you in as far as being a master, but the key is inside of listening and cultivating understanding. Most people kind of make this implicit assumption when their partner's doing something different than what they think is the right choice, that their partner, maybe they don't care about me, or they're just being a butthead, or like, you know, we make all kinds of stories as to why they're doing that thing. in
Mm-hmm.
reality, usually they're just trying their best and they're doing
Mm.
what feels right to them based on all of their lived experiences around money and relationships in life, right? So if to be able to come from a perspective of curiosity, like, oh, who is my partner about money? What has them make the choices they're making? And be willing to learn the same things about myself so I can share it with them as well.
Mm.
And then once you can have a safe space for conversation, right, then you can feel like, okay, now we can talk about our priorities and values. And then we can look at them and make some judgment calls, right? We may not be able to do all of our priorities, but like, what if we each picked our top one or two, right?
Mm.
Or what if we have $2,000 extra a month and we're going to put a 1,000 toward each of our goals? Okay, how do I want to rank my priorities given that I have $1,000, right? And so some of that's going to look like, how much are the things, how much do they cost, the things that you want that cost money? How long is it going to take you to get there? How much do you want those things, right? You might want your favorite thing you might want might be $1 million, and something you want almost as much as $10. So maybe you want to
Yeah.
go for the $10 thing first because you'll get there sooner, right? But it's all, to me, about listening, asking questions, and communicating your own thoughts, feelings, and needs in a way that allows the two of you to come together as teammates, share your visions, and then find where there's overlap, great, and where there isn't, that's okay too. We could just be pursuing these two disparate goals at the same time, even if
Yeah.
it's out of a shared account, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, this goal, I don't care about that, but you do. So we're going to put some money toward that. And you don't care about this, but I really do. So we're going to put some money towards that.
Yeah.
That's okay. No problem.
Yeah. And one of the things I always love to say is there's also a world in which you can lean into each other's strengths. Like my husband's just better at spending money on things that are fun than I am. So, I try to lean into that with him, whereas he will lean into investing in a way with me that he may not traditionally do himself.
Yeah.
Another thing I just want to make sure we touch upon, because it comes up so much, is debt, right? Like there's so many sort of multifaceted issues around debt. There's the shame that debt brings for the partner who has the debt. There's sometimes the resentment of the partner that's inheriting the debt. How should couples navigate the issue together? Should a couple tackle it always together? Is there an instance where it makes sense to divide and conquer it?
Yeah. I think that, again, the key here is to start by establishing a foundation for healthy communication around money
Mm-hmm.
and that safe space, and being able to step back and look at the debt in the context of the whole picture of what each individual is trying to do and what you're trying to create as a couple. It is a difficult topic, right?
Mm.
But the one thing I'll say is, while I'm a big advocate for stepping back and having a bigger vision, I also want to say there's a space for don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? That's the
Mm.
phrase, meaning like, okay, I have a client who has, the amount of debt is not massive, but she's got a bunch of small debts in a whole bunch of different places, right? So I said, look, I don't know what the perfect plan is going to look like, but come back and tell me, like, what's the one or two debts that are the most emotionally impactful for you, right? And she identified one and she said, you know what, this one is tied to a past relationship that was really negative. I really want to pay this one off. She called the bank, got on a plan, in 3 months that thing's going to be gone, right?
Awesome.
And that's going to be a huge weight off of her shoulders. So, it's best, ideal is to have a holistic plan, but if you aren't ready to get there, maybe you just talk about that one debt and take one step and continue practicing that intimacy. See, it's a practice of team building, intimacy building, partnership building. It's not about there's a destination, right? So even if the ultimate place we'd want to get to is we pay all of our debts and everything together, it's okay if right now what we're going to do is I'm going to pay this one on my own, right? And then we're going to keep talking about it and keep checking in. Maybe in a few years, we'll be ready to pool our debts together. There's no race to win. There's no destination to get to. It's all about, my work is all about how do we stop fighting so we prevent the divorces, but also how do we use this topic to bring the two of you closer together, to strengthen your relationship and be able to have your money work more effectively for you.
That makes total sense. I love that you keep referencing teamwork, because we feel very similarly about that at Zeta. We sort of talk about teaming up around your money or mastering money as a team. So let's talk a little bit about what happens when the team gets expanded and you suddenly have kids to contend
Yeah.
with. And the sort of whispers and the rumors are that kids change everything when it comes to money. And somewhere I've read, multiple times that kids cost about $250,000 per child, which is like an incredible amount of money over their first 18 years. How do things change? How can couples prepare when they find out they're pregnant and they're about to have a baby, or they're having their second or third child? How should they be preparing for kids, and how does the money conversation evolve?
Yeah, great question. And I mean, the first thing I'll say is there's no one right answer or right way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're having kids, I would say sit down with your partner and talk about what are your hopes and dreams for your own lives and for as
Mm-hmm.
parents, right? What are the fears and worries that come up? Take a really thorough assessment of your current financial situation and now start factoring in the expense of having a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
How much money you think that might look like each year, and be willing to start off with something and then play around with it, right? Like, I think every parent wants to give their child the best, but there are trade-offs. And so if you look at that, you've got a good public school or a good private school, and it's like, okay, well, the private school is going to be 10,000 a year. We don't automatically have to do it just because we think it might on average be slightly better than the public school. Let's actually have a conversation about how this fits into our overall plan, right?
So,
And
Adam, let me interrupt you there real quick, because there's something there I push on, right? Like, up until this point in your life, in some ways, it's very clear for a couple to be able to say, this is my stuff, this is our stuff, this is your stuff.
yeah,
But when it comes to kids, suddenly it's like all yours, and you have to make very, very significant decisions. And like you said, you might have some very different feelings about simple things like, or not simple, but important things like public school versus private school. Is there a way to try to figure out a way to get on the same page? For example, if I want to send my kids to Montessori school, but my husband wants to send them to, I don't know, math and science school. How do you I guess, how do you get on that same page? How do you make sure that money is a tool that isn't used as a weapon, but rather is actually something that's helping you get there?
yeah. So I'll say two things. Number one is to explore when we talk about like your money story or history with money,
Mm-hmm.
what did school look like for you? How does that play
Mm-hmm.
into your current views on it? Another tool that I like to use is I kind of like call it like zooming in or zooming out. Zooming in means maybe getting more granular. Zooming out means getting more like at a higher level. And with this one, I would say to pull it back, like, well, your husband wants your kids to go to math and science school. Why? What does that mean to him? What does that represent?
Mm.
Maybe it's because he thinks that math and science are the most important things for the future of the world, and we want to have our kids be part of the solution. And it's like, well, what does Montessori school mean to you? And you're like, well, you know what? I think having kids who are open-minded and cultured is extremely important, and that's important for them and the world.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now we can go for, we just want our kids to be the best citizens of the world.
Yeah.
Okay, how can we achieve that? And maybe and when you get to that level where there is agreement, that's when compromises that you may not have realized they were there, they may surface, like, oh, so why don't we send them to the math and science school, but we make sure that their after school activities come from a really broad range of more like open-minded and culturally diverse and arts and more liberal arts type of things, right? Or the
Yeah.
other way
Yeah.
around. Maybe they go to the Montessori school, but they have a extra tutor for math and science, or that's what we focus their programming at home around, right?
Mm.
And of course I made up that situation, but just to
Yes,
kind of
of course.
illustrate
Asking for a friend.
yeah, where you can find that sense of shared values,
Yeah.
that is really important. And then you can figure out, okay, which actions align with those shared values, or which set of actions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And new creative solutions may come up. And look, the reality is, in relationships, we don't each get 100% of what we want all the time, right? That's not the nature of a long-term relationship, of a marriage, of a family, right? So just being willing, like you said, to lean in, have those conversations, understand your partner at as many levels as possible, and vice versa, and then figure out, okay, how can we best align with that in a way that still creates enough safety and security for each of us,
Mm-hmm.
and pushing progress towards our goals and values.
Got it. And last and final question, Adam. I want to make sure we talk about this because I think it's a hot topic, because it has a lot of emotionalness attached to it, which is a word. Extended family. I think there's a common source of friction when we hear about is where one side of the family is in need and maybe the other side isn't. How do you navigate that when one partner might feel like you're giving up almost your own financial security as a family to help that extended family?
Yeah, well, I want to offer a skill, right, which is something we've probably all heard of, is like empathy or empathizing. And normally we think about that as like being in the other person's shoes, seeing the world from their point of view, getting a sense for how it feels for them. And it's all of those things. But one thing I learned over the years is that empathizing with somebody and letting them know that their thoughts and feelings are valid doesn't mean you have to agree with them. And so when it comes to this, really focus on inviting your partner to share why they think what they think. Let's say, hey, why do you think we should be supporting your family in this way? And just listen and come to understand. Don't have to worry about, well, but we can't do that because. Just listen. Just 100% listen. Make sure you understand them. Then vice versa, the one who maybe says, oh, I don't think we should support them that much or at all. Listen to why that matters to them, right? Investigate that, whether it's a current thing or it has to do with what they've seen in their family in the past. Just get to that place where you understand each other and breathe. Sit with that for a day or two or a week or two, and then come back to the table, right? And based on that understanding you have of each other, then start to experiment with some different ideas. Hey, what if we had one person live with us, not all three? Or what if we had, tried this? Would that feel good enough? You may end up agreeing, you may end up acting all the way towards what one person or the other thinks. But what I want to focus on here is the process, that you're really looking at this from a place of compassion and empathy and validating each other's experience and feelings. And when you're able to do that, it doesn't get into this heated emotional place. Like, emotions are important. I'm not trying to say don't be emotional, but it doesn't get to this heated place where our like visceral responses are, and we're not in this reactionary state and having that rule the day. We're actually connected to ourselves, to each other, and to our overall goals and the kind of people we want to be. And from there, then you can look for solutions. And remember, any action that you take with your finances, they're not permanent. So you could do something and in a few months you're like, uh-oh, that wasn't a good idea, right? Let's reevaluate. And I've dealt with that with clients as well, right? Where they've had a family member move into their place and then they've had to go back to the drawing board and be like, this isn't working, right? Or reevaluate that. And so just, practice that compassion, that listening, and that faith, and then trust that you'll be able to come together if things aren't working as well later on and make adjustments.
Makes sense. Adam, I can't thank you enough for these great insights. Our viewers are going to be so excited to test these in their own lives. So appreciate all of the good nuggets. To those watching, please feel free to share, comment, questions, or feedback below, and we'll do many more of these expert Q&As in the future. Thanks.